Hi, this is Christy from Optimal Wellness, Yoga, and More, and I'm here to share the 10 lessons that I learned from taking part in my first 30 Inks 30 days this September, as well as share with you my top pen and ink combos from the month and the 5 things that I would do differently if I were to participate in 30 Inks 30 days again. So come along, let's get to it. I had 3 different pens that showed up in the top 4 slots of the month. That means they got a rating of an A or A minus. And this month I was rating based on the combination. I wasn't rating the pen and the ink differently. So one or the other could knock the rating down. But the number 1 pen of the month was this pen, my Pilot Falcon Extra Soft. It is a modern gold flex nib, and it was fabulous with Tomo and Lynn's Kaleidoscope Ibuki, an ink that I sadly have to say appears to not be available. I did find one place in Canada that has the version without the shimmer, but what I really appreciated about this ink and that shimmer was that it was consistent throughout without having to take a lot of time to stop and wiggle the pen around to redistribute the shimmer. And it was subtle and just gorgeous. So if anybody's looking to get rid of a bottle of that one, please hit me up. I would be interested in rehoming that. It also got an A minus paired with J. Arbonne Larme de Cassis. And that is a color that's just like in my wheelhouse. I love purples, violets, magenta sorts of colors. And just getting that nice variation in ink flow depending on the line variation and everything, it just was phenomenal. I loved it, even though I'm still learning how to write well with a flex pen. But having positive experiences with good ink pen combos is the first step towards learning to do that better, because if it's enjoyable, you're going to practice more. So that was the number 1 pen, and as of this moment, I think that is the most expensive pen in my collection. The runner-up is my Pilot Decimo. This is like the Vanishing Point, but a little smaller in circumference, a little closer to the previous version of the Vanishing Point that was around in the late 90s, early 2000s. I have a fine nib unit in here, and the ink it was paired with that took the winning A slot was Diamine Tyrian Purple. I do not have this ink in my collection yet, but the sample is almost gone, so I'm pretty sure it will be coming soon. And again, this is kind of in that same range as the Larme de Cassis that was in the Falcon that got the A minus. It's a similar color family sort of thing, so no big surprise. And then the third pen that had a pairing that rated an A is the pen that has been the bane of my existence since it entered my life. So this was a real win. This is my Navalar or Narwhal Classic Plus. It's a vacuum filler, and I had all kinds of problems with it. But with the help of some wonderful people on Simone's Discord, I took it to micromesh and some mylar paper and got it functioning. It's still a tiny bit broad for my taste, which is no surprise. It's a Western fine. So generally in Western pens, I tend to prefer the extra fine. And in the Eastern pens, especially Japanese, more the fine, sometimes the extra fine. Because I work in small grids, I work in Hobonichis and common planners, which have grids less than 5 millimeters. This would probably be somewhat comfortable on my 5mm Rhodia dot pad that I use for writing to my pen pals, but I do still have to make a concerted effort to write a little bigger. But I love the red of Diamine Carnival, and it was a little bit of a drier ink than some of the inks that I've tried in there before, so I was able to get finer lines with it. And it was overall a positive experience, and really my first truly positive experience with this pen. So that is fantastic. I may still go get the nib custom ground to something a little finer, maybe with a cursive italic on it. I'm not certain, but at least now I'm not in a rush to go get that done. So those were my top 3 that rated the A's, 4 others that showed up in the B plus rating. And so the way I rated was C was your average pairing. It's fine, it's workable, it's nothing special, nothing bad either. It just is meh. And then I went up from there. And the reason none got an A plus is I kind of reserve A plus for, oh my gosh, this pairing is so absolutely fantastic for both the ink and the pen that I can't imagine separating them. Which it would be hard for me to admit that, because I always assume the next ink or the next pen is going to be better. So I didn't give out any A pluses, but I did give out 6 B pluses over the course of the month. The first one went to a roughly $3 to $5 pen, depending on shipping and where you sourced it. It is, on the cap it says Lan Batu, and I'll have that down on the screen. This is the fine nib that I got, and the ink that I put in it during the first 2 weeks was Iroshizuku Kujaku. So if you've watched any of my prior videos on fountain pens and inks, you may know that I love Iroshizuku inks. They're well lubricated, and I think in general, they're going to give a positive experience to any pen that is a finer writer. The ink just has properties that helps the nib glide along the paper. It can help with drier nibs as well. And so this was a good experience, better than average, especially considering the price of the pen. Then I had 2 of my safaris show up, my red and my dark violet. The red showed up when I had Diamine Twilight in there, and that's an ink I've loved ever since I got the first sample. I don't have it in our collection because I thought it was too close to Eau de Nil when I first got Eau de Nil, but now that I've swatched them side by side and done my ink journal and all that stuff, I can tell that there's definitely a difference. The only thing that held us back from getting a higher rating was that the red has a medium nib in it. And I almost never write with mediums unless it's like to spotlight something, like headers in my planners. Again, because I tend to work in the grids that are smaller than 5mm. But I liked the ink so much that it still pulled that medium nib through to a B plus rating. And then the dark violet scored a B plus both times it came up in September. It came up with Diatramentus dianthus, which is a bright, bright magenta color that actually, truthfully, I thought I was going to hate. And then it came up on the last day with Diamine Emerald, an ink that apparently I like so much I bought it twice. So the purple one, or well, it's actually, I think, called Dark Lilac, at least the ink that was paired with it. They both came out in 2016 as limited editions, has an extra fine in it. So that definitely, or no, it had a fine in it. So that definitely helped. It was better than the medium. It's still a little too broad for my small grids, but it's workable, especially for pen pals or for headers and things that need to stand out more in my planners. The other pen that rated a B plus is a Jinhao X450. It has a broader fude nib, so it can lay down a line that's almost as wide as my common planner grid is. So it's fantastic for highlighting rows and columns or just creating a colored background for headers. And the ink that was in it is an ink that's totally suited for that kind of application. And that was Stipula Saffron. It's a nice, buttery, orangey, warm yellow color. It was legible in my transcription, which kind of surprised me. I don't think I would use it in that application though, but I definitely use it for highlighting. And the only reason this one didn't show up with its first ink is that it was first paired with Diamine Oxblood, and that color is just not a good application for me and my usage pattern for a broad fude nib. But the combo was beautiful. It felt like butter going down because the nib has to be fairly wet to support a fude nib, and it was overall a good experience, just doesn't match my usage pattern. And then I had another fude, the finer fude in a Jinhao 82 show up in the B+, and this was paired with Rohrer & Klingner Salix, which is an iron gall ink. And because iron gall inks can be a little questionable, now R&K's Salix has been around forever and used forever and is well regarded, I still get a little nervous putting that into more expensive pens. So it's nice to have the Jinhao, and I have many more that have extra fine and fine nibs. So that ink will definitely be showing up in more Jinhaos as I move forward. And so those were my top pens from 30 Inks, 30 Days. I'm going to share my 3 bottom pens, and this includes my TWSBI Eco in white. And part of that is it got the unfortunate luck of getting a turquoise tealy ink both times. It was first inked up with Emerald de Chivor, which is the one that gave it a D rating, because the shimmer just did not really come through. It didn't really lay down. You know, the first couple letters had shimmer, but then it died off super quickly despite agitating the pen as I wrote, and it just wrote such a broad line. But, you know, overall, nib on paper, the feel was fine. It just is not made for teal and turquoise inks, which, thanks to you guys, I learned that they tend to run wetter for whatever reason. Turquoise seems to run wet, so that was okay. The other D rating was the companion to the B+ rated Eco Clone by Lanbatu, and this one is an extra fine. And the only reason I got this rating is because I had lots and lots of issues the second time I inked it up. It was inked up with Diamine Matador, which is another nice red, very similar to Carnival. And I let it sit for a couple days and it kind of dried out, which I would expect from an inexpensive pen. I primed the feed to get it going again, and then I did the transcription, and at the end of my Zentangle, it blurped out big drops of ink multiple times, and I don't know what the cause of that was, but because of that, I do not have very good confidence in this pen. I will probably try it with another ink just to make sure it wasn't some fluke user error or something, but this one may be headed for the landfill, unfortunately. And then the one C- rated combo was my Jinhao 86. This is the one with the hooded nib. that is kind of a clone for the Parker 51s. And it had Kobe 54 Goshiyama ochre in it. And it was really the ink that drug this rating down. It was super, super dry and super light and illegible. So it just didn't work. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to try and make the best of a bad situation, so to speak. And I'm going to put that Kobe Goshiyama ochre in the white TWSBI and see if we have a working pair. Haven't gotten around to that yet. I'm kind of recovering from all the pen cleaning that 30 Inks 30 Days required. So, an update on that situation will be coming at a later date. So now let's go ahead and move on to the 10 lessons that I learned from taking part in 30 Inks 30 Days. I had 2 really big lessons, which is kind of surprising when you think about the fact that I've been using fountain pens since like 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, I believe. So 20 years. But until recently, like July, I think, I hadn't started to record what pens I used with what inks and how that experience felt. So by making myself do that for 30 days, I learned lots of lessons that I maybe should have known before. But of course, shoulda, coulda, woulda, we shouldn't should on ourselves. So my number 1 lesson was that before deciding if an ink is the right one for you, try it in another pen. If you were unhappy with it in one pen, try it in another pen, because the nib, the feed, and just the overall feel of the pen can really impact your impression of an ink. And the second lesson is really the reverse. If you get a new pen and you put an ink in it and you're not a fan, swap out the ink, put another ink in, because again, the ink can make or break your experience with a particular pen, nib, and feed. So if you learn nothing else from 30 Inks 30 Days, I think those are the 2 biggest lessons to walk away from. And I'm actually quite happy that I used 15 pens, so each pen got used twice, because that meant I was able to learn more things about the pen, because I tried it twice with 2 different inks. And so that helped me discern things like this Eco is a wet writer. And knowing that turquoise inks, for example, tend to run wetter, I know not to put turquoise inks in that pen. And I also learned that peachy and orange colored inks tend to run a little drier. So now I know I should maybe put those inks, especially if I have a dry experience, into a wetter pen. So by going through this 30 Inks 30 Days and rotating through pens, you can learn how to more successfully pair your inks with your pens. The third lesson I learned was don't judge the ink by its swatch. And I know Simona from Simone, she handed out stickers at the San Francisco Pen Show that says, "Don't trust a swatch you didn't make." But I can't even quite trust a swatch I made, because even with using the Sailor Hokoro Fude dip pen to write with different line widths in each ink, the color of the ink, or the tone and depth of the ink, can change based on the pen you're putting it in. So I had a few inks that I really didn't think I was going to like at all. One, Diamine Marine, which I actually really liked the color that came out of the TWSBI. I just didn't like the line width, and I really didn't think I was going to like the Marine. The Dianthromentis Dianthus, again, that was one of those super bright, loud, super saturated colors. And in writing, I actually kind of like it. It wouldn't be my first go-to, but I can definitely see having times and applications where I would want something along those lines. not enough to go out and buy the bottle for myself, but I'm not going to shy away from samples that are in that direction anymore, because I want to learn more about whether I can kind of estimate what it's going to look like in a pen based on the swatch by working with more of these. Another one I thought I was absolutely going to hate was Colorverse Alpha Ori. Still not my color ink. It's too orangey, too pure. But I was okay doing the transcription with it. I wasn't like appalled by the color, and so that surprised me that I could be just a little more open to the bright colors once I actually put them in pens. The fourth lesson, sorry, I'm looking at my notes and losing track. The fourth lesson is that cycling through the pens and the ink so quickly makes it easier to compare and to judge. And that can be a double-edged sword. It meant I was able to, learn things about my pens because I used them twice in rather quick succession with different inks. But it also is perhaps a little tougher on the pens and inks because I can compare so readily. But I think it's a good practice, and I'm not going to commit myself to doing it again in November for certain. But I think it's something I will come back to. I don't know if I'll do it every month that has 30 days, like some of you hardcore people out there. Amanda, Maria, I know you guys jump in every time. But I can see myself doing it again. The fifth lesson I learned was when it comes to pens, for the most part, you really do get what you pay for. I mean, my top 3 pens are close to my most expensive pens. These two, the 2 pilots, the Falcon and the Decimo, are my most expensive ones in my collection. I think this is the 3rd most expensive, but I'm not sure. I don't remember what I paid for my first fountain pen, and that was 20 years ago, so I don't know what it would be in today's money. This one is a $60 pen, I believe. You can get a similar one from TWSBI at the $70 mark. Both of these were over $100. The Falcon runs for $200. These days, I don't remember what I paid for it. It was probably that or close to it because I bought it at a local pen shop. I didn't buy online. So, my absolute best experiences were in the more expensive pens. That doesn't mean you have to spend $60 or $100 or $200 on a pen, though, because all the B pluses were mostly my Lammies and my Jinhaos. So the Lammies are in that $30 category, depending on whether it's a limited edition color and whether it's the All-Star or the regular Safari. And the Jinhaos vary too, depending on where you source them from. They're a little more expensive from Amazon, but you get them quicker. And sometimes you have more reliable information than ordering from AliExpress, but you can also order from AliExpress. Do be aware that some sellers, there is a shipping and handling fee on top of that price per item, and it doesn't go down the more items you buy. So you do need to figure that into your costs. But for a totally usable, workable experience, you don't have to break the bank. You may find that you need to do a little work on the nibs. You may need to, especially with the Jinhaos, hit some micro mesh and some Mylar paper to smooth stuff out. You may have a random tine misalignment or something. So you have to be kind of okay to learn how to tune your own pens. But where is it better to work on tuning pens than with a pen that costs less than $10, in lots of cases less than $5? That is what got me into being okay tuning my pens, and I'm glad I am. Otherwise, I would still be highly unhappy with the $60 pen. And who wants to be happy with a pen that you've spent $60 on? So, it's okay to splurge, but you don't need to break your budget. Buy what you can afford and what you like. And I'm happy to have less expensive pens in my collection because then I can put more experimental inks in there. I can take them out and about and not worry about them walking off. And I like to have pens for things like document ink and like the iron gall, where if I leave the ink in the pen too long and it messes the feed up or messes the nib up, I'm not out a lot of money. So that's my experience. Plus, sometimes you have the itch that you just want a new fountain pen, and sometimes the budget isn't there to buy a $200 pen. So you can scratch your itch with the Jinhao without really breaking your budget, which can be nice at times. Sometimes we do really need to, fill that urge, because sometimes if you hold yourself back for too long, then the reverse happens. And when you finally let up on your restrictions, then you go crazy, and you don't want that to happen either. The sixth lesson is a little more of a personal lesson. I learned that I can follow through on challenges, but it does require me to give myself grace and permission to meet myself where I am. And I talk all the time about how, as a yoga therapist, I meet my clients where they are, and I teach them how to meet themselves where they are when they come to the mat. Because every time we get on that yoga mat, we're a different person. We've had a different amount of water, we've moved a different amount, we've moved in different ways before we've come to the mat. All those things make the yoga practice a brand new practice every time we come. And especially if, like me, you're living with chronic pain or other physical restrictions, it's good to be able to just honor where you are in the moment. And I talk about doing that off of the mat as well, but this is one sort of application that I struggle to do that. I jump into challenges. I think they have to be done a certain way at the beginning, and then I feel like I need to keep to that all the way through. And instead, this time, I really gave myself permission to adapt and change. I did still do my transcriptions and Zentangles for each pairing, but some days I just did transcriptions with several of the pens, and some days I did multiple Zentangles with several of the pens. And if you watched my whole series of weekly videos from 30 Inks, 30 Days, you'll notice that the videos get a little simpler and a little shorter each week, because I simplified the filming, I simplified the editing to make it fit. Now, I still fell off the bandwagon on pretty much everything else. I hardly use my planner at all, which is not what this challenge was intended to make me do. So I know that there needs to be a balance struck, and I was starting to find that balance at the end of the 30 days. But I want to jump in, and then if I can't keep to it exactly how I envisioned it in the beginning, I tend to just quit. And I actually made it through, and I am so proud of myself, and I'm celebrating that, because we have to celebrate our wins, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. And these wins that you have with fountain pens and inks, you can take that success and apply it to other areas of your life. So, I could develop a challenge for myself to learn more about something else. And I know that I can see it through if I give myself permission to adapt and change day to day and meeting myself where I am. My seventh lesson was also kind of along these lines. It's that it's okay to Zentangle for just the practice, for just the meditative aspect, for just putting ink on paper. It doesn't have to be art. It can take 15 minutes or it can take 3 hours. It can be however you need. I used to do it with the traditional way with microns and shading with an HB pencil. And I definitely had 3x3 Zentangles that I spent 3 hours on, because I would get so deep into the minutia of the shading that it would take me hours and hours. But I found that just 15-minute ones are actually quite fulfilling. It is enough to kind of reset the nervous system. It's enough to be meditative and kind of get you out of any spiraling thoughts and just get you out of your head, period. And it doesn't have to push something else off of your list to do that day in order to accomplish. So that was another big thing for me, another thing that I am glad to recognize now, and I hope to take it with me moving forward. Number 8, also related to Zentangles. Well, I'm glad that I dusted off Zentangling and I finally Zentangled with fountain pens like I had been wanting for a daily challenge. Swatching, transcribing, and tangling was an awful lot to do, especially when you paired it with filming and editing. Even though I was only putting out one video a week, that first week I did process videos and this forward-facing narration, and I cut back and forth and did all of that, and that took an enormous amount of time. I also didn't have down a manner of capturing those B-roll images that were easy to locate and plop in. So while I am doing some cutting back and forth here with this video, I've captured the B-roll in a way that makes it much easier. The 9th lesson I learned was I'm not going to seek out the heavier Tomoe River paper, the 68 gram. I'm not necessarily going to avoid it at all costs, but overall, I found most of my pairings to be quite feedbacky, loud to write on, which just like boggles my mind, and kind of scratchy. And I also found that it didn't really show off sheening as well as in the weeks. Now, what I need to go and do some research on is whether my Taroko design notebooks with the Tomoe River paper, if they're Sanzen paper, and if the difference is really the Sanzen or the paper weight, because in the weeks it's still the old Tomoe River paper. So I'm not certain if it's truly lightweight versus heavyweight, or if it's light, or if it's original Tomoe River versus Sanzen. It may be both. I'm not certain, but I'm definitely not going to be, seeking out the 68 gram, because it was not as pleasant writing. And that's part of this too, is the enjoyment of taking the pen and the ink to paper. My 10th lesson, probably the most valuable of them all, is that the fountain pen community is awesome. You guys are amazing. I want to thank you so much for all of your support and your encouragement on putting myself out there, getting videos out there, getting forward-facing videos out there, because those were all things that I had a very big block on. And there was something about the fountain pen community that made me feel safe to put myself out there in a way that I wasn't doing in other arenas that I really should be doing. So thank you so much. Especially thank you to Simona Simone for your Discord. The community you have built over there on Discord is absolutely fabulous and a wonderful support and a wonderful wealth of knowledge. So I'm so glad that I jumped in and did this, and that I connected with everyone over there. Now, like I said, I'm not sure I'm up for another round of this as quickly as November. But what I would do differently next time I participate in a 30 Inks 30 days, I would probably cut back on what I needed to do each day. I would perhaps just swatch and do a small writing sample, or perhaps, and I think we talked about this on the Discord, perhaps just decorate paper for stationery for pen pals with the ink for the day. Or I would maybe just choose to focus on transcription or on Zentangling rather than both in one go. And it would depend, what I would choose would depend somewhat on how many inks I had to use that I didn't use in September. And kind of same with the pens. The other thing I would do differently is I would not randomize both the ink and the pen. I would probably choose to randomize the ink. And now that I have a little bit more understanding of which pens of mine are wetter writers and drier writers, and I have a better understanding of what inks are likely to be dry and wet, and even developing a feel for how those feel when I'm doing the swatches with the ink sample vial lid. Sometimes you can feel that an ink is dry when you're doing that. So based on that, then I think I would actually choose the pen after I've pulled the ink for the day. That way I have a better chance of a successful pairing of the ink and pen. The third thing I would do differently is perhaps swatching and small writing sample on multiple papers so that I can learn more about the papers that I have and use. My primary journal right now is the B6 Common Planner. I intend to have 2 different B6 Common Planners next year. And then Hobonichi, and I have 3 Hobonichis lined up for next year. I can't believe I'm going to have so many so many journals. And then I am using the second half of Astrology that was my journal for the first half of the year. That's kind of my note-taking brain dump sort of paper. And then I tend to use Rhodia Dot Grid for writing to my pen pals. I usually put leftover stickers from the monthly sticker kit down with maybe some washi tape and use that as my stationery. That way I can be a little creative. I can use up what I've brought in. So I'm trying not to accumulate and hoard my supplies. So that helps me in that manner. So it would be nice to know, like, what's the writing experience like on each type of paper. So I might do that going forward. And I could see myself, even though the ink can read very differently coming out of a fountain pen, I could also see myself just choosing to use the Hiroko Fude dip pen just so I don't have to clean up so many pens. Although I did kind of get in a rhythm most Sunday afternoons. I cleaned all the pens I had used for that week, threw in any of my wife's pens that were up for a cleaning as well, and that was nice, but I'm kind of overdoing that every week. So we'll see. You know, like I said, I may do it in November. I may wait until what is it is March or April, the first 30-day month of the year, whatever. I may skip November because there's also Inkvent in December. So I don't know. The other thing that I would do differently, the last thing I would do differently is I would stick to the weekly summary videos like I did, but I'd stick to more the last ones where there's very little to no process B-roll. So no seeing me write in my transcription notebook, seeing me do the Zentangle, because that was just a lot of extra editing. And sometimes you just need to streamline things and make them as efficient as you can. And it isn't absolutely necessary to see that stuff. Aesthetically, it's fun. I love seeing that. But what I enjoy most out of the videos is just hearing everybody talk about their experiences with their inks and pens and talk about their life and to just connect. So it feels like I'm sitting down for a cup of coffee with a friend at a cafe when I put their videos on. So I'm going to try to not get super invested in the production quality of a 30 inks 30 days challenge. So that was my experience in September. If you were along for the challenge in September, I would love to hear what your experiences were. What did you learn? What would you do differently next time? What were your top pens and inks? I would love to know. Feel free to leave a comment and let me know what your experience was. Feel free to add a link to a video of your summary of your 30 inks 30 days experience. And I look forward to continuing to share more pen and ink goodness with you going forward. Until I see you again, be safe and be well. Aho. And so it is. Bye, guys. Thank you all so much for being here.